and each point leads into the next one. It leads people to the stack, and people are leaning in. They're ready to buy. What is going on? We are live. It has been a minute since I have done one of these. I am in my new Airbnb. I am super excited to be here. I've got this nice living room, so I am using it to do Facebook Lives. It took me a little bit to get set up and get everything together. A lot of stuff going on right now. Hang on, I'm filming on the other camera, so I have to make sure that that is on and set up. We are doing some exciting things. So if you're just starting to watch this, I am putting out a beta program where I'm going to help people build their webinar presentation. I'm going to help with the funnel. We're going to help with the lead magnet. We're going to help with the follow-up, everything that goes into a webinar so that you can have it launched by the first of the year. That is my goal. For those of you watching this wondering why I would be teaching webinars, I've critiqued more than 100 stage presentations. I have helped clients build presentations that sell from the stage. We've done over $1 million in one single event from stage with a presentation that I built. I know what I am doing, guys. I have watched and listened and built numerous presentations. Webinars are very specific, and what's great about a webinar is you're not live on stage. You can do the webinar live, but because it's through something like this, people give you a little bit more leeway. Now, the downside is you really have to be engaging. You have to be fun. You have to be quirky. You have to get people to tune in because you're competing with all the stuff that is in their world, right? You're competing with Facebook, you're competing with their phone, you're competing with dinner in the other room or their kids running around. But if you do it correctly, webinars are super powerful. So today I'm going to go over the 3 reasons that webinars don't convert. A lot of people have a hard time with webinars. When I first built my first webinar, I think it was 2015, 2016. I had already spoke on stage a couple times. I was like, this webinar thing is going to be super easy. Well, it wasn't. I started building the deck. I ran into all kinds of problems, and that brings us to the first reason that webinars don't convert. The first reason that webinars don't convert is because people don't start with the stack. They start with everything else. They start building a deck. They start with what they want to teach. They start with everything but where they should start. So you want to start. So what does that mean, start with the stack? If you don't know what the stack is what you are selling at the end. So at the end of your webinar, you are going to sell something. Even if it is just driving them to a phone call, you are getting them to exchange money or time, something of value, for something that they need to value more than that. And that is your stack. That is what you are offering. That's what you're giving them at the end of the webinar. So last week was critiquing a webinar for somebody. I do webinar audits, and I did a webinar audit for this guy that had spent hours and hours building his webinar. And we got to the pitch after 50 minutes of him talking, which we'll get to that a little bit later. We get to the pitch, and it was literally, okay guys, this is what it is. Okay, if you'd like, you can jump on a phone call with me. I'd be happy to talk to you. Do you think anybody got on a phone call with him? Absolutely not. Because why would you? There's nothing of value there. He spent all this time teaching and then didn't show them more value, a way that he could provide more value. So you always want to start with the stack. The other thing is that it informs all of the stories that you are going to tell in your webinar. So the second secret is don't teach, use stories. So what does that mean, right? Everybody's heard story selling, or you have to tell a lot of stories to sell, or you should always talk with stories. But so many people do stories poorly. I have, I think, more than 10 trainings on how to tell stories to sell. And the whole thing is that the reason that it works is because when you're telling somebody something, if you say you can help people with something, immediately Something goes up, no, I don't know if I need that. But if you lead in with a story and you show people how it's useful in their life, they will be much more open to it because that wall never goes up. Think about the best teacher that you had in high school. Just think about that for a second. You have a picture of them. Now you have all the other teachers that were in your high school, right? The teacher that was great and all of those other teachers that weren't so great, that weren't entertaining, that weren't fun to listen to, that you don't consider a great teacher, they all had the same amount of knowledge. If anything, I bet the teachers that were boring and hard to learn from had more knowledge. They threw more knowledge at you. They probably stood up in front of the classroom and just lectured. Whereas your teacher who was your favorite, I bet he or she was highly engaging. I bet they used stories. I bet they were fun to listen to, and I bet that they showed that they actually cared about people, about the kids in their class. That's all you have to do to make your webinar great. You have to teach, make it fun, make it entertaining, talk about the stories that get people involved. Raise your energy up, tell fun, engaging stories, and you'll have people listen. So what stories should you use? Well, it all depends on your stack. First grade teachers. My mom is on here watching. So first grade teachers, they have to be fun and exciting in a different way, right? They have to keep their kids entertained. Otherwise, they're running around the room. They're outside throwing stones at each other. Wasn't there a teacher, I think my mom, maybe not my mom, I think there was another teacher in my mom's school that actually tied a kid to a chair with a jump rope. That will tell you how long ago she was teaching. So you have to use stories to teach. The Bible, so many people, like if you've read the Bible is full of stories, parables that teach. They show the example. They get people, they get the light bulb to go on above people's minds. And get people to realize how powerful it is. Once you have your stack done, that's the story. That tells you what stories you need to use because you want to use stories that pre-frame the stack. If you think about a bad speech that you listened to, a bad webinar that you were on, there was probably a point where he told some cool stories, he got people entertained, he taught a little bit up front, right? He or she. They taught up front, but then they got to the stack and you were like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if you know the 5 things, there should be 5 things in your stack. Each one of those things needs to have a singular story to it. Then, whatever you're teaching on, you can make sure that those stories frame the 5 things that are actually in your stack. So what is the third thing then? Well, the third thing accounts for more than 60% of webinar conversions, more than 60% of sales. You guys have any guesses as to what it is? Anyone? All right, funnel and follow-up. So the funnel should have 3 pieces to it. There are 3 main things that go into your funnel. First off, how do you get people on your list? But the biggest one is your landing page. Does your landing page invoke enough curiosity that the person will actually remember it? I've seen landing pages that were so bad, people would opt in and then they would forget all about it, right? They wouldn't remember the webinar the next day. Now I know a lot of you are probably saying, well, what about evergreen webinars? I just want to have an evergreen webinar where they can enter their email and they'll go right to it. Well, that's fine, but you have to get really, really good at the presentation piece of the webinar before you can turn it evergreen. If you just do one take and you try to turn your webinar evergreen, I guarantee it will not be very successful if you don't have a lot of experience. So the first thing is to do your webinar live. Well, to get people on there, you've got to invoke a high amount of curiosity. You've got to get people super engaged when they hit that landing page so that they have to show up. The next piece to that is you have to have a lot of really good follow-up, and that is more than just email. Email worked several years ago. It still works now, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. The other things that you can do are follow up through Facebook Messenger, follow up through text message. Those are just 2 of the things that you can use to follow up with people and get people really excited and remind them to show up on the webinar. Now, after that, there are 6 different ways that you should be following up. And this is where I see a lot of people fall apart. They do an email follow-up, right? They might offer the replay once or twice through an email follow-up. And that still gets a lot more people. But there are 6 other ways that you should be following up with people after the webinar, and it accounts for more than 60% of the sales. So these are the main 3 reasons if people have said, I've tried running webinars and it just doesn't work for me. Well, it's probably because they didn't start with a stack. Instead, they started with what they wanted to teach. Well, you should never, ever, ever be teaching in a webinar. You should be using stories. So start with the stack, list out your 5 things, figure out exactly what those things are. Then you figure out the stories and the teaching points that you're going to use to pre-frame the stack. If you do this correctly, people will actually start leaning in at the beginning of your webinar, and that's what causes them to stay on. If I saw a webinar a couple weeks ago where they had 90 people register on the front end, and less than 10 were there at the pitch. And that tells me that they're really bad at storytelling. They're really bad at getting people engaged. But if you tell great stories and each point leads into the next one, it leads people to the stack, and people are leaning in. They're ready to buy because you have pre-framed the stack so well. They want what you have to offer, and they're willing to exchange what they have, whether that's time or money, for what you have because they see it as being more valuable. Whether that's getting on a phone call or whether that is selling something, you can do either one through a webinar. So if you guys like this, if you had questions or comments, feel free to shoot them to me through Facebook Messenger. You can drop a question in the chat down below. It should alert me. I will be happy to answer it for you. I am launching my beta program where I am actually going to do the same thing that I did for people that were on the live stage. I'm going to work with them. We're going to build your entire presentation. I'm going to help you build the deck. I'm going to help you with all of the stories. There are 15 total stories that every great webinar has. We're going to help you build out those stories in the webinar. We're going to start with the stack. We're going to do some research on your market and make sure that you have an amazing offer. Then we're going to have the stories that sell that offer. And then we're going to build out your funnel and your follow-up. And the goal with all of this is to have it ready to go by the first of the year. If that is something that interests you, reach out to me. I'll be happy to talk with you about it. I'm only taking on 5 people. I already have 3 of the spots filled. There are 2 left. If you want one of them, let me know. Or if you have questions. Guys, it has been awesome. I am super excited to have been back on lives. It has been a little while, but it's fun to be here. You will see me over the next couple days. Make sure to hit me up if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.